Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. On behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you joined us for our Clean Energy Metals Conference. Our next presentation is from Terra Balcanica Resources. Please note, you can submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings by clicking Book a Meeting in the top toolbar. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Alexander Miskovich. He's the President and Chief Executive Officer of Terra Balcanica Resources, which trades in the OTCQB venture market under the symbol TEBAF and on the CSE under the symbol TERA. Welcome, Alex.
Hello, John. Thank you so very much for having me on, and thank you to all the audiences tuning in. We are a new issuer, OTC, and proud to be part of the marketplace. So Terra Balcanica Resource Corp is a Canadian junior explorer with a portfolio of critical mineral properties on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. We have our flagship project in Bosnia and Herzegovina in southeastern Europe, but also last year acquired a uranium portfolio in Saskatchewan in Canada. As such, we are well positioned to capture the interest from the markets on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, especially at such an interesting time when energy and critical metals are in high demand. This is a forward-looking statement, which I encourage everybody to take a note of. I suppose the most important part is that I, as the professional geoscientist and a qualified person, according to the Canadian National Instrument 43-101, I'm responsible for all the scientific and technical information presented in this corporate deck. So, in a nutshell, Terra Balcanica contains a portfolio of critical metals exploration claims in Bosnia and Herzegovina, specifically 168 square kilometers of land surrounding an existing mine which produces 350,000 tons of lead, zinc, silver, antimony concentrate. Our portfolio in Bosnia is divided into two licenses, both of which contain targets which are of primary focus and interest for us. We have drilled both, and right now in phase 3 drilling program, we are advancing one of these targets yet further. Target number 1, called Chumovici, is basically a 7-kilometer long corridor. So it's not a singular target, it's a set of targets containing shallow, high-grade, silver, antimony, lead, zinc dominated intermediate sulfidation epithermal vein hosted system. Brezheny, on the other hand, located 13 kilometers to the southeast, is a about 1.2 kilometer wide magnetic geophysical target that also has a particularly strong and long conductor at depth, which has been so far drilled, and the intercept of half a kilo of silver, approximately 520 grams per ton silver equivalent over 20 meters is what was recovered from the discovery hole in 2023. Phase 3 drilling, as I mentioned, is a follow-up onto that hole, and we plan to drill another 6 or 7 more holes focused on this high-grade silver, antimony, zinc conductor at depth. We have just completed another round of financing. As it stands, we sit at 67.4 million shares outstanding, with about 66% controlled by directors, executives, advisors, and closely associated parties. And then again, as I mentioned, last year, we have optioned another very interesting project, in my opinion, as a geologist, 600 square kilometers of land surrounding world-famous Athabasca Basin in Saskatchewan, Canada, primarily focused on uranium. It's highly prospective for uranium, divided into a couple of claim clusters. But historically, this chunk of land contains drill holes with up to 5% or 5 grams per ton gold over 40 meters, lots of rare earth element anomalies, copper, nickel showings, etc., etc. We plan to advance this portfolio probably in terms of a spin-out or a subsidiary vehicle in 2026. Just to mention again that for comparison's sake, Terra Balcanica has achieved top ranking in the world of antimony when it comes to drill intercepts. So our January 20th press announcement from this year and the discovery hole at the Brezhny target featured world's fifth best antimony intercept for the entire calendar 2024 and the first month of 2025. So highly prospective. And again, we are at the cusp of that so-called Lassonde curve when we are going to basically try to prove the size and volume of this body, knowing that the grade and the mineralization is there. So here we go, Europe. Again, for those who are not familiar, we are located right at the border between Serbia and Bosnia. The project is outlined in yellow here. A beautiful thing about working in Europe is the fact that you are so proximal to the European markets, very well connected by rail and road, seaborne ports in Croatia and Montenegro, as well as Bosnia. And you're technically only 1,000 kilometers away from the BMW factory in Munich, Germany, or Porsche factory in Stuttgart. Europe is also a continent that's badly starved for resources, and antimony and zinc being on the list of critical metals is certainly something that Europe will need in the future. And there we have this polymetallic project called Biogorzanic, which we have been advancing for the last 3-4 years. And again, as I say right now, at that critical point when we are going to hopefully be able to prove the size of the body, which should be world class in itself. Again, the project is divided into 2 licenses. One is called Trumovici, the other one is called Olovine, and the 2 targets. Let's go zoom in now on this particular area. Sorry, actually, prior to that, I just want to say a few words about the Balkans. Again, for those who are not familiar, as you can see, the entire region is populated by the companies large and small. Everything from global giants like Rio Tinto to relatively small early explorers like ourselves, and everything in between. We have Dundee, we have Zijin, we have China's second largest miner, Freeport-McMoRan, Canada's Eldorado Gold, Dundee Precious Metals. And then, of course, one thing I want to particularly note is the success story of Adriatic Metals. For all those who are familiar with the story, they'll probably know what I'm talking about. And amazing feat they have managed to accomplish by advancing the project from 2018 until 2024 by basically building a brand new mine in Bosnia, which has a very interestingly composition of metals very similar to what is it that we have. And they're only about 80 kilometers away from us. They've recently been acquired by Dundee Precious Metals out of Toronto for $1.33 billion US, which is obviously good news for Bosnia and ourselves. Again, Terra Balcanica sits right here near the town of Srebrenica and the Srebrenica magmatic complex. The landmass of the former Yugoslavia is very well mapped, however, underexplored. And that's exactly where we come in with agility and opportunity to leverage historical results, archival data, but also apply modern cutting-edge techniques to unfold the riches and unfold the potential which Yugoslav miners in the former Yugoslavia were just not able to do. Okay, now zooming in on the project itself this time. Here we are. Very interesting thing about our project is that we are sitting right next to a mine, as I mentioned. This is a mine owned by a British company called Mineco Ltd. that also owns 4 other mines in the region, 1 more in Bosnia and 3 in Serbia. So they have quite a large regional corporate presence. And they also produce concentrate very similar to the type of ore that we have discovered. Why is that interesting? Well, because of the potential synergies in the future. As they are slowly decreasing their resources and coming eventually to an end of mine life, well, Terra Balcanica is in a place where it can actually start to grow its resource. So it wouldn't be unimaginable and quite profitable, and it would make complete sense for us to strike some sort of a partnership in the future should we ever discover something that's mineable and use the existing capital infrastructure that sits on the site, such as the mining and crushing circuits. So in other words, we would just then have to truck the ore and take advantage of the existing infrastructure on site. As you can see, again, ours is a polymetallic project. It does indeed contain a mix of these metals. So far, we haven't done any metallurgy, but judging by the work done in Sase, it would be quite an easy ore dressing procedure, which would involve flotation circuit and then concentrate production. We have, over the course of 2020 and 2021, expensed about close to 2 million Canadian dollars, really plowing through the entire 168 square kilometers, throwing everything but a kitchen sink at this particular project, applying airborne geophysics, soil sampling, rock chip sampling, remote sensing, stream sediment sampling, and basically mapping the entire corner of these two licenses so as to come up with three main targets. Two of these, one called Trumavici and the other one called Brezheny, are the ones that we have really indeed focused on and drilled so far. So again, I want to emphasize that this project features the drill targets. So the mineralization that we have presumed and anticipated is now confirmed by way of drilling. And again, we are just in the process of sizing up these ore horizons of mineralization and trying to bring it to some sort of preliminary mineral resource level within hopefully next 24 months. So let's now focus on, so we're going to be talking mostly about Trumavici and Brezheny, these two targets over the course of the next 2 or 3 slides. Here's the Trumavici. As I mentioned, it's a 7.2 kilometer long corridor that runs from northwest to southeast. Superimposed here on a geological map, you see these yellow ribbons, I call it spaghetti, that basically represent former Yugoslav, non-43-101 compliant mineral reserves defined by the Yugoslav geologists back in 1979 to 1983, 2.3 million tons of ore with a relatively low content of lead and zinc. However, the interesting thing about the work done in the early 80s is that Yugoslav geologists never assayed for silver or antimony. And this is exactly where we come in. We have realized that this is not so much a lead zinc project as much as silver antimony project, even though lead and zinc do constitute, in some cases, significant proportion of the overall metal mix. So we have defined 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different sub-targets, Seoce, Yoshila, Chumonica, Trumavici region crest, and the green dots are showing you the locations of successful positive drill holes. As you can see, we have done work at Trumavici crest, in particular Trumavici ridge, but also a little bit at Yoshila as well. And again, this is quite a large swath of land, 3 kilometers in some cases, which just shows you how much of a potential we really have to add onto the existing drilling. For example, we haven't even tapped into Trumavici and Seoce yet, and that's exactly what we plan to do. So if you now zoom even further on the Trumavici ridge zone, you'll see what's called a fence diagram, or basically a quasi 3D cross-section stacked against each other with about 100 meters separation between these three slices. As you can see, the geometry of the body is fairly simple. It's a singular tabular fault-hosted epithermal mineralization, massive sulfide dominated with stibnite, galena, and salarite, but also silver and gold, distributed throughout, primarily in pyrite or sulfur salts. And as you can see, if you multiply the X times Y times Z, in terms of the size, we have about 800,000 tons of ore right here. And that's just in that particular one cluster, which of course leaves a lot of opportunity to add onto the existing tally. But what I particularly want to draw your attention to are two things. First of all, how shallow this thing is. In some cases, we've struck mineralization literally 6 meters below the surface. That's like 18, 20 feet below surface, in some cases slightly deeper, but nonetheless, very much open pittable from what I've been told by mining folks. But again, even more impressive are the grades. So here we have sort of a table of drill intercepts so far with gold, silver, zinc, lead, and antimony, of course, and these are the originally reported silver equivalent numbers back from 2023 when we press released them. What I've done, in addition to that, I've calculated a bit of a price sensitivity chart and plotted numbers in terms of what is it that they would look like should they be reported today. I must note also that even these numbers are slight underestimate because of the fact that antimony has recently risen to $27 a pound. So numbers would effectively be even higher. But we are effectively talking about an 800,000 ton ore system so far, as defined, with about 1 to 1.2 kilograms of silver equivalent per ton as the grade, which is exceptionally high. And as I mentioned, very close to surface. So Trumavici is something we certainly want to advance, and we will in the phase 3, probably the tail end of the phase 3 drill program. However, the guy that we are currently focusing on is this target called Brezhnev. Brezhnev was initially discovered by airborne geophysics as a massive 1.2 kilometer magnetic blob or extremely high magnetic anomaly. That coincided in space with all the soil and rock chip sampling that we've done on surface. In other words, it was already geochemically interesting and anomalous at a time when we flew airborne geophysics, when geophysics and geochemistry coincided in space, and we realized we had actually something going on there. We done some surface channel sampling or trench sampling, came up with 1 gram per ton gold on surface over about 10 meters, amongst other things. And then decided to actually put a first deep hole down to actually discover what is it that we have underneath this massive geophysical and geochemical anomaly. So this is the drill hole called BRE, BD002. It went down all the way, some 1,800 feet for American audiences, or 700 meters, 2,000 feet down. And on the way down, we have intercepted a couple of very interesting things. I'm not going to be talking too much about the big conductor at depth. Actually, what the audience is looking at the moment is a cross-section through the Brezhnev target, but in the so-called electromagnetic spectrum, in a conductivity space. All the red colors or bright colors are conductive pieces of rock, whereas all the blue and green domains are resistive, less conductive parts of the system. As you can see, basically, we have a kind of 3 different domains. We have this hanging wall, the upper part, which is mostly resistive. And we have this plume of rock going from left to right, from the bottom left to upper right, which is kind of a plume of high conductivity. And then we have a high conductor at depth. Well, that high conductor at depth happens to be a plutonic rock, shallow stock, which obviously gave rise to hydrothermal fluids. Then we have on top a gold system. So the gold identified in surface and trenches happens to be actually more extensive than we thought. It goes down to about 88 meters depth. Initial drill hole carried 0.61 grams per ton gold over initial 88 meters of depth. However, it's really this plume from lower left to upper right, this conductor, which I'm going to show now in a slightly different way by accentuating the conductivity, is really what I believe is the holy grail here. Namely, it's a 1.2 kilometer and 20 meters thick, in some cases even more, conductor or domain of rocks with high conductivity that goes from the place where we intercepted all the way to the surface. So very important thing, it shallows upwards. And at the place where we struck through it, we have intercepted about 436 grams per ton silver equivalent over 20 meters, primarily consisting of antimony and zinc mineralization, but also with a little bit of lead as well. This is a 2D cross-section through a effectively 3D body, which means that this body also has its width, goes into the page and out of the page to the tune of about 650 meters. And as I mentioned, it's about 20 meters thick. When you multiply these 3 numbers, the width times the length times the thickness, times the specific gravity, and you look at the grade, we are having potentially, again, everything's predicated on only a single hole, and that's exactly what the phase 3 drill program will try to prove by going upwards, up this conductor. We have potentially a world-class body with multi-million ton ore potential on our hands. Now, again, without saying any more, let's see what the drill program and phase 3 drill program comes up with. But right now, it's just too coincidental that we have imaged a very crisp conductor that also right at the place where drill hole has gone through it features this mineralization. So we are very confident that this fold-hosted epithermal, intermediate sulfidation, epithermal massive sulfide dominated mineralization will carry all the way to surface, and we're going to keep on intercepting it as we go up. Why is this kind of relevant, and why is this tonnage? As I mentioned, about half a kilo of silver per ton and about, upwards of 10 or maybe even 20 million tons of ore. Well, this particular slide just shows you a bit of a comparison between us, although we are very small, and some of the world's best. So Adriatic Metals is our neighbor in Bosnia. We have Visla Silver, a Canadian company operating in Mexico. The reason why I took these two as a comparison is primarily because of the fact that, in a sense, they're very similar. They all started in 2018. They had a massive upward projection. They defined world-class resources. Adriatic Metals has 21.1 million tons of ore defined. These are very similar. The grades are 620 silver equivalent per ton, 530. And they both started in 2018 with about 19-15 cents respectively, which is exactly where Terra is right now. So I'm hoping we can replicate. Again, the combination of metals is very similar, and of course, as I said, Adriatic operates in the same jurisdiction as us. So these are all the reasons why I'm actually putting these two as a comparative examples of what Terra possibly could be in a few years' time. Very briefly, let's move to the Canadian uranium assets. Of course, last year we have come across an opportunity which we just couldn't pass by. We were offered a possibility to option quite a large portfolio of land surrounding world-class Athabasca Basin in northern Saskatchewan, Canada, which is home to some of the world's largest and highest grade uranium deposits. Northern Saskatchewan supplied historically upwards of 20% of world's uranium. And the original exploration thesis that focused primarily at the unconformity hosted uranium underneath almost 2-kilometer thick package of sandstones within the basin itself has now recently moved to surrounding the basin and targeting something called basement hosted mineralization that's carried by these long faults running north, east, southwest, and penetrating through the basin itself. Examples of those kind of basement hosted deposits lately have been Arrow deposit and Triple R, respectively by NextGen and F3 Uranium. And they're both have obviously defined amazing resources. And, especially NextGen is sitting at a value market cap that is tremendous. So we would like to replicate that. We have a large swath of land, 600 square kilometers, and it is highly structurally, here it is, divided into 4 different clusters. One is called Charlotte Neely, the other one's called Fontaine Lake. Then we have a snowbird zone, and of course, South Pendleton. This one is in particular interesting, Charlotte Neely, because it's surrounding Black Bay Fault. It contains 14 historical mines that have, been at some point explored within 10-kilometer radius of where we are. Mineralization up to 6.2% on surface. These stars show you exactly where they are within this orange blob, which is our swath of land. And of course, the entire area has been now subject to a massive staking frenzy in the last year and a half, where everybody's taking ground, focusing on these long faults and their ability to carry uranium mineralization in the context of the so-called basement-hosted uranium mineralization. So that's something that we would like to do over the course of the next 24 months. Obviously, focus on Bosnia is a primary focus, but let's not neglect the potential of uranium, which was particularly in vogue last year when we acquired this property. Here's a zoom in of Charlotte Neely claim cluster. As you can see, all these radioactive symbols show you the locations of the surface showings, up to 6.2% U3O8 on surface in some cases. And then, interestingly enough, historical drill holes with close to 5 grams per ton gold over 50 meters at surface. So that's also something that, Terra Balcanica could simply go and twin, and we would probably have a very good press release. But again, focus is uranium. All of these pink lines, which are segments of faults with a particularly high uranium readings, is what we would like to focus on, and at some point raise enough cash to actually advance it and drill it. In terms of capital structure and financing, Terra Balcanica currently stands at about 67 million shares outstanding, fully diluted 100 million. Particularly proud of the fact that close to 60% upward is owned by directors, management, and related parties. Public float about 40% of it. This is the history on the left-hand side of all the financing that we've done so far. Given the market conditions, which haven't been favorable for the small junior explorers, I think we've done a good job of advancing the projects, keeping the projects alive, minimize the shareholder dilution, and move forward. Again, next steps, currently 2,000 to 2,500 meter phase 3 drilling at Vjegorzanic in Bosnia. We have a marketing campaign starting in September, which is going to hopefully work in synergy with the results coming from Bosnia, and then the commencement of uranium exploration sometime in 2026. I will conclude by basically reiterating one more time and asking rhetorical questions, why Terra Balcanica for all those ones who didn't know of us before. Well, we have a high grade, I would say world-class silver antimony mineralization in Bosnia, which is about to be drilled out and a true potential of it shown. We have a large Canadian uranium portfolio, which is strategically positioned to provide uranium for the thirsty North American markets. I think uranium is the way forward in terms of green energy transition. And then, of course, we have a clear capital market strategy to force superior returns for our investors by promoting and rapidly advancing projects, which hopefully will bring the Bosnian targets to the preliminary mineral resource level by the Christmas of 2026. For all those ones who would like to learn more about Terra Balcanica and our activities, I urge you to reach out to me directly by either giving me a call or a text message or sending me an email. The contact information is on the upper left side, and I would be more than happy to engage each and every one of you, especially now that we have expanded our audience base with a listing on OTC Marketplace. At this point, we're going to turn over to a couple of questions that have been put forth, particularly regarding the Bosnian project. The first one is, what is the potential of having a mine nearby? I guess I already addressed that. Well, the clear one is in so many words, as Mineko is slowly driving their resource down, and in my opinion, they have 2 or 3 more years left for them. We are building ours, and hopefully, just at the right time, when we come with a preliminary mineral resource or even pre-feasibility level project, we'll be in a position to strike some sort of a deal where we can take advantage of their crushing and mining circuit on site. I really would like that. It would make complete sense. It would make for a case of a circular green mining scenario, which is something that everybody would want to advance. Brezheny target, for example, the one that is being targeted by the phase 3 drilling, is topographically higher than the mine. We could potentially even be using some sort of a gravity transportation model to transfer the ore down to the location of the mine and process it right there on site. Some sort of a bucket system or a pulley system or whatever. So that would be clearly something. Obviously, we're still not at that stage, but something that's high on my mind in case we actually end up proving the resource at Brezheny and Trumanici as well. Alternative to that would be obviously to truck the ore, which is not so ecologically friendly, but nonetheless, it's not a huge distance as well. It's about 15 to 20 kilometers to the site. The next question I have here has to do with uranium portfolio. How do you expect to advance uranium portfolio given your focus in Bosnia? Well, that's a good question, and sometimes sometimes eyebrows have been raised in terms of why are you guys not turning over to a uranium portfolio when you have this Bosnian asset? Well, I must say that, again, from a technical geological merit standpoint, when I saw the historical data for the uranium portfolio in Saskatchewan, I just couldn't walk away from it. I convinced the board that this is something that we should take it. It was relatively cheap from the standpoint of the option agreement. Again, it's my firm belief that uranium is the way forward when it comes to the green energy transition. We have a portfolio that basically needs to be surveyed geophysically, and then a relatively small 3,000 to 5,000 meter drill program can be put in place to test the primary target, and we can shave away from the 600 meters or 600 square kilometer portfolio to only the targets that are of particular interest and focused on those. The exact model of financing that project is going to be defined in the next 3-4 months, so stay tuned for that. But certainly, again, our operational focus is Bosnia, but we want to carry the torch with the uranium portfolio in Saskatchewan as well, and advance the exploration there too. And then one more that has to do with the situation. What's Bosnia like from a mining investor standpoint? Bosnia, my native country. I'm a Canadian, naturalized Canadian for the last 30 years, but I was born in Bosnia. I think it's an amazing place to operate, an amazing place to invest. Even though it suffered greatly during the Bosnian Civil War in the early 90s, ultimately the reason why I ended up here in North America, it has drastically changed. The landscape for investment has drastically changed. And I think the Adriatic metal story is exactly telling us how you can advance a project at a super fast rate, something that's basically unheard of in North America or Australia over the course of 6 years from the moment you initially struck the mineralization until the moment you build a mine without hesitation. So the country has a rich mining history. It was mined back in the Roman times, cheap labor force, skilled labor force, clean and relatively simple regulatory procedure. And again, government seems to be willing to bend backwards, thirsty for foreign investment, because obviously, let's say that Adriatic Mine is, I think, is now Bosnia's largest taxpayer, corporate taxpayer. So it's obvious, and it employs about 300 to 400 people locally in a town that was basically dead prior to arrival of Adriatic Metals. Now it's all revived, and people are flowing back in. So many different reasons to invest in a place such as this. Again, being positioned in Europe is a good place to be, considering the proximity to the European markets. And I think overall, it's a perfect jurisdiction to operate in, and we're very proud to be right there. So I guess that's all the time we have for now. For any more questions, I will be available on one-on-one basis on Thursday, as well as I believe September 3rd. So please feel free to reach out to me either through this platform or directly, and we can engage on one-on-one basis. And I'm really happy to explain further our current activities and answer any of your further questions. Thank you so very much.